These findings are deeply disturbing. But most disturbing of all, as Baroness Casey makes clear, is the fact that too many of these findings are not new. As Baroness Casey's audit sets out, there have been 15 years of reports, reviews, inquiries and investigations into these appalling rapes, exploitation and violent crimes against children, detailed over 17 pages in her report, but too little has changed. We have lost more than a decade. That must end now. Baroness Casey sets out 12 recommendations for change. We will take action on all of them immediately.
So that is Yvette Cooper sounding like she's getting very serious about the grooming gangs now. You had heard her say the word disturbing there. She also called this report damning, and she is welcoming the recommendations of this report. And we've all been celebrating about the fact that we seem to have got a national inquiry announced. But is the Labour Party really taking this issue seriously now, or are they doing what they absolutely have to do now that this report has come out and insisted that we must have some sort of national inquiry? Are the Labour Party still trying to water down the extent of the investigation into this issue because there are people and institutions that they do not want to be completely exposed? Well, let's take a listen to the recommendations that Yvette Cooper is going to read out from this report so we can see what changes are going to be made, and then let's delve a little deeper and see if Labour is really taking this issue as seriously as they should be now.
Because we cannot afford more wasted years. So we will introduce new laws to protect children and support victims so they stop being blamed for the appalling crimes committed against them. New major police operations to pursue perpetrators and put them behind bars. New national inquiry to direct local investigations and hold institutions to account for past failures. New ethnicity data and research so we face up to the facts on exploitation and abuse. New action across children's services and other agencies to identify children at risk, and further action to support child victims and tackle the new forms of exploitation and abuse online. Taken together, this will mark the biggest programme of work ever pursued to root out the scourge of grooming gangs and child sexual exploitation. Those vile perpetrators who have grown used to the authorities looking the other way must have no place to hide. So let me spell out the next steps we're announcing today. Baroness Casey's first recommendation is we must see children as children. She concludes too many grooming cases have been dropped or downgraded from rape to lesser charges because a 13 to 15-year-old is perceived to have been in love with or had consented to sex with the perpetrator. So we will change the law to ensure that adults who engage in penetrative sex with a child under 16 face the most serious charge of rape. And we will work.
That's very good news, that it will be considered rape if they're under 16, because, you know, very strangely, and you see this in the report, you have council workers and whatnot calling people who are, 10 to 16 years old, just saying, oh, they're just prostitutes. Oh, they've consented. They've agreed to have some, a bottle of whiskey in exchange for sex. Therefore, it's not rape. And it's like, they're kids. They're kids. It's not okay. It's not okay in any scenario for a man to be having sex with a 12-year-old, and it's just beyond belief that so many authorities insisted that these girls were doing this by their own choice, and what was happening was perfectly acceptable. But anyway, let's listen to the rest of the recommendations.
Closely with the CPS and the police to ensure there are safeguards for consensual teenage relationships. We will change the law so that those convicted for child prostitution offences, while their rapists got off scot-free, will have their convictions disregarded and their criminal records expunged. Baroness Casey's next recommendation is a national criminal operation. As I've set out, arrests and investigations are rising, but the audit recommends us going further. So I can announce the police will launch a new national criminal operation into grooming gangs, overseen by the National Crime Agency, bringing together for the first time all arms of the policing response, and will develop a rigorous new national operating model which all forces across the country will be able to adopt. ensuring grooming gangs are always treated as serious and organised crime. And so rapes who groom children, whether their crimes were committed decades ago or are still being committed today, can end up behind bars.
So there we have Yvette Cooper reading out the recommendations, and certainly some fantastic changes being announced there. And I think what this does show, even though Labour have not admitted it specifically there, is that it is possible to be implementing recommendations and making changes whilst there is an inquiry ongoing. Labour insisted over and over and over again since January, when all of us have been demanding a national inquiry, no, we can't have one because that would delay any positive changes being made until after an inquiry occurs. And we're all, screaming, hello, you can do both. You can implement recommendations from the ICSA report and other reports whilst also doing a national inquiry. And she's just shown now that it is indeed possible to do that. But will Labour apologise? They clearly got it wrong in January and in the months after, where everyone was insisting we need a national inquiry. And we were told time and time again, well, we were even told by Keir Starmer that people calling for a national inquiry are jumping, I quote, on the bandwagon of the far right. But did she apologise for the mistake and put her hands up and say, look guys, we messed up, Casey's report shows that we messed up and we're changing our minds? Well, let's see what happens when Richard Tice asks her to apologise.
Richard Tice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome this statement from the Home Secretary, and that there will now be a national inquiry. Does the Home Secretary think that that will be finished within, let's say, 2 years for the British people? And given that she quite rightly apologised to the victims and survivors, will she now apologise on behalf of the Prime Minister, who smeared and labelled those of us who called for a national inquiry?
Yeah. Well, he raises the issue about the timescale for this, and in the discussions that we have had with Baroness Casey, and also recognising the many issues that people want to raise with an inquiry, we had expected that it might take around 3 years. Clearly, if the Commission is able to work faster than that, then people will clearly want answers as swiftly as possible.
I want you to take note there of the fact that she said the word commission rather than inquiry. We will get to that technicality after this video, but that is key to the question of whether Labour is watering down a proper investigation, a proper national inquiry.
But final details about the timings will obviously need to be determined. I think we do need to make sure that we are both implementing the recommendations of previous inquiries and also making sure that we are pursuing these further investigations in local areas as swiftly as possible. And I do reiterate in my statement earlier the recognition of the huge harm that has been done to victims and survivors through decades. And I would urge him to look at that section of Louise Casey's report with the 17 pages of failure year after year after year to follow through and to take action. And I do believe that victims and survivors are owed an apology for that failure over very many years.
Okay, so no apology there at all from Yvette Cooper. We're still yet to hear any apology from Keir Starmer. He's, gallivanting out in Canada at the G7. Now, I've got on screen here the map that shows the links when it comes to the trafficking element of this horrific crime. You have girls trafficked all over the country by criminal gang networks. These crimes are not isolated to one place at the time, and that is one reason why people and why victims have been calling for a national inquiry, because they think that full picture needs to be understood. If you just look at the local level, you're not necessarily going to link towns together, link criminal gangs operating across the country in different places, and connect all of the dots. That's one reason why people have been calling for a national inquiry. Remember, GB News have showed that around 50 or over 50 towns and cities have been, at least have been found to have grooming gang activity, and so many of these towns and cities will be linked together. Now, we were all set celebrating, as I said, that we are going to be getting a national inquiry. It was announced we were going to get that. But then Yvette Cooper, you heard her there use the word commission rather than inquiry, and the term seems to be changing and flip-flopping between a national commission versus a national inquiry. We know there's going to be a judge, there's going to be statutory powers, but is there going to be an inquiry that looks at the national picture, or is it simply going to be the case that there is going to be a national commission that simply helps local areas to conduct their local inquiries with statutory powers, i.e. not looking at the full national picture? And it's not just a matter of not linking the towns and cities together and these criminal gangs that have a trafficking operation going on. That is a concern. Dominic Cummings has raised a big concern about Whitehall covering up the scandal massively, and he seems to think that Whitehall has, changed the terms of an inquiry to make sure that themselves are not revealed to have been complicit and involved in the cover-up of the grooming gangs scandal. So you see there is a screenshot here explaining what exactly this national inquiry or national commission is going to do. And you see it says the government will establish a national inquiry under the Inquiries Act to coordinate a series of targeted local investigations. There will be statutory powers to direct targeted investigations in local areas. The commission, is it an inquiry? Is it a commission? Who knows? The commission will have powers to compel local organisations to compel with its investigations. And then the next bullet point there, it says, following the appointment of the independent chair, the commission will urgently begin considering evidence and data to decide the first local areas for investigation. And Crush Crime has said they are still covering it up. The inquiry have announced it will not investigate central government's knowledge, actions and cover-ups. And Dominic Cummings has said very on brand for Starmer to screw up the whole thing, U-turn, but let Whitehall manipulate the U-turn to ensure Whitehall itself escapes investigation. Everybody who has been campaigning must keep campaigning so the investigations get Whitehall's documents, including Wormald, then DFE, now Cabinet Secretary. And in fact, Dominic Cummings spoke to GB News about this supposed Whitehall cover-up that he talks about.
You said in your speech that you witnessed cover-ups of the rape gangs. Now, I thought that was fascinating. Can you talk about what you saw? What happened? Did you report these people? Should they, be prosecuted for covering up these terrible crimes? Can you expand on what you said?
So obviously all over Whitehall there was mass cover-ups of the whole thing for the same reason that we've already alluded to, fear.
Wow.
Fear of the political consequences of facing reality. What I saw in 2011, there are lots of different things. Well, normally in Whitehall, the cliche that it's a cock-up, not a conspiracy, is generally true. The one big exception, I would say, is regarding child abuse.
That's pretty shocking that Whitehall was, well, according to Dominic Cummings, helping to cover up the grooming gangs scandal, because we talk a lot about Labour-run councils in the local areas where grooming gangs were occurring, about them wanting to cover it up. There's been, a lot of evidence on that, but Whitehall down in Westminster helping cover it up, this is quite new, these revelations. Let's take a listen to the rest of what he had to say.
Actually, multiple conspiracies constantly and largely successful. I watched these happening repeatedly in the Department of Education because the issue was parked there by Gordon Brown and Ed Balls, so I had to deal with it when I was there. I would watch the redacted documents and the actual unredacted documents about lots of these cases, and you could see that the redacted documents are redacted entirely to hide the incompetence of the system. Now, what happened on the gangs is that when Andrew Norfolk at the time started to try to report the issue, the council went to officials inside the Department of Education and said, we want to bring a judicial review to have the courts suppress the Times' reporting and not allow it to happen.
It's crazy.
Some of the officials inside the DFE, who routinely organised cover-ups on such issues, were, of course, very in favour of it. But there were another set of officials inside DfE who agreed with me that this was absolutely appalling, and in fact we should do the opposite. So what we ended up doing was saying to Michael Gove, you should write to the council and say that if you bring this judicial review, we will actually appear in court on behalf of the Times, not on behalf of you. That obviously blew up the judicial review attempt by the council to keep it secret, and then Norfolk could publish his piece in the Times. Unfortunately, I think Norfolk died recently without even knowing that this ever even happened. But that's just one small example of something which happened many, many times on this subject over a few decades in Whitehall, which is, of course, why the system is absolutely desperate not to have an inquiry. A system which has inquiries at the drop of a hat about all kinds of, like, one person dies, public inquiry, spend 80 million quid on lawyers, take 5 years. This case involving thousands and thousands and thousands of children, no.
It just, to me, it seems bizarre there's no accountability to the people that you're talking about. I mean,
it's only bizarre if you believe the old ideas about how the system works. It's not bizarre once you realise that the people there are not operating on the incentives or with the values that you think they are. It's actually completely standard and completely normal and completely unsurprising.
Okay, I'm going to...
Wow, absolutely shocking what Dominic Cummings is saying there about Whitehall cover-ups. And I mean, that is absolutely shocking that they tried to use judicial review to cover up what was going on in Rotherham, and good that they did what they did, as he said there, getting Michael Gove to write a letter to tell them, you know, sorry, we are not going to play ball with this. We're not going to cover this up for you. This was part of the report, this bit here, which says, in the face of mounting allegations about widespread child sexual exploitation in the town by Andrew Norfolk of the Times, Rotherham Council sought an injunction to prevent them from publishing, claiming reporting would endanger the girls and young women. Really? Really? He published many articles about Rotherham, but when he ran the story of Amy, a victim of child sexual abuse in 2012, Andrew Norfolk said, "We'd thought that Rotherham Council and South Yorkshire Police would have to respond by saying this is appalling, we will take action." He said instead, what they did was ask South Yorkshire Police to launch a criminal inquiry into who had leaked the material to me. I mean, just absolutely beyond belief. Far more interested in covering it up than helping young girls, helping victims, and making sure the perpetrators are put behind bars. And I think that Dominic Cummings, he made a really salient point there, that the government will quite happily have national inquiries about anything and everything at the drop of a hat. He said that they'll happily, you know, have a national inquiry because one person has died and waste 80 million quid on lawyers, and it takes 5 years. I mean, national inquiries, they are often very long and very expensive, but they will have them about almost anything. Why was there so much resistance to this? I mean, it seems that the Labour Party, they have now had their hand forced by this report that has come out from Louise Casey. I mean, how on earth could they stand there and say Louise Casey, who is, you know, highly regarded, highly renowned expert on this subject, she has said we need to have an inquiry, but we're still not going to do it. They've had to say yes, but it seems like, you know, going back to this and this focus of there being just a national body that helps local investigations, you know, completely avoiding holding people who work on a national level, people who work in Whitehall to account, and, you know, possibly avoiding, you know, going over the full extent of this and those trafficking networks. It feels like the cover-up is still continuing to some extent, and the fact that the Labour Party also still just refused to put their hands up and say, hey, we got it wrong, it just feels like, you know, I know there's reason to celebrate, but it really still feels like there is resistance. There's a heck of a lot of resistance from the state to the proper full truth about this issue being exposed, investigated and exposed for good. So anyway, that is the latest on the grooming gangs. Hopefully we'll have more clarification as to whether what we are doing is technically a national inquiry or a national commission, and exactly to what extent it will be national. Will it simply help local areas, or will it really collect the dots on national level? I hope that we will get clarification over that in the coming days, weeks and months. But let's see what happens. We are yet to receive any apology from Keir Starmer on Yvette Cooper or Jess Phillips on this yet. Do you think we will ever get an apology? Let me know in the comments below. I think I've got my guesses. Anyway, I'm Chloe Dobbs. Thank you very much for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe to Reasoned if you're not already, so you don't miss out on any more videos.